Hi, this is Mr. Nazarian. Our learning objective today: I can convert different sized measurements within the same measurement system to solve real-world problems. 5th grade standard MDA1. Here's our problem today. Carson ran 8 miles in a race over the weekend. Of course, his mom asked him how many feet he ran in the race. He said that not only could he figure out how many feet he ran, he could also calculate exactly how many inches the race was as well. How many feet was the race? How many inches? Okay, so first of all, we need to know some facts about different units within the standard measurement system. It's also sometimes called the imperial measurement system, and it's the one most oftenly used in the United States. So, first of all, here's some facts that are going to help us solve this problem. 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. 1 yard is 3 feet, and 1 foot is 12 inches. Incidentally, I'll just do some little history about our measurement system. It was called the imperial measurement system in addition to the standard measurement system because it was created by the royal powers of the English Empire. So the foot, for example, was actually the exact measurement of King Henry I of England. And it was a measurement of his foot. They said that's how long a foot is. Anyway, it's in our system that we use now, it's also 12 inches. So if we know that, can we figure out, if we know that there are 3 feet in a yard and 12 inches in a foot, can we figure out how many inches are in 1 yard? Go ahead and figure that out. Okay, so we know that 1 yard equals 3 feet, and there's 12 inches in 1 foot. So here we got this yard here. The yard is made up of 3 feet, right? So we got a foot and a foot and a foot, right? And then each one of those is made up of 12 inches. So I'll just put a 12 here. So this foot is 12 inches, and this foot is 12 inches. So that means that this yard has 12 inches plus 12 inches plus 12 inches. So the total would be 36. So 1 yard is equal to 36 inches. Well, how many yards are in a mile? Well, this one's a little bit trickier. If we know that there are, but we can still use this information to figure out. So if we know that there are 5,280 feet in 1 mile, but we know that there's, in 1 yard, it's the same as 3 feet, how can we take these two numbers to figure out how many yards? Remember, a yard is bigger than a foot, so there should be less of them in that 1 mile. So what kind of operation could we use these two numbers of 5,280 and the 3 feet? Okay, well, if you said division, you're right. If we multiplied them, right, and we end up with over 15,000, and that wouldn't be reasonable, because then that would be saying that there's over 15,000 yards in a mile. But we know that a yard is larger than a foot, right? It's 3 times larger than a foot, actually, right? So there should be 3 times less amount of them, right? The amount of yards in that 1 mile should be less than the amount of feet, because it's a larger unit. So that means we're going to divide them. So if you take 5,280 divided by 3, what would you get? You would get 1,760 yards. And how many inches would be in a mile? Okay, so again, we're talking about a mile, but now we want to figure out inches, right, which are quite a bit smaller than feet, and we know that there's 5,280 80 feet in a mile. So we would take this information that we know and this information that we know, and how could we use those two numbers to solve how many inches are in 1 mile? What kind of operation would we need to use with those two numbers? Okay, if you said multiplication, then you were right, because remember, if we divided it, we'd get a lot smaller number, right? We'd get a few hundred, and that would make sense for them to be only a few hundred inches a mile when there's thousands of feet in a mile. Inches are a lot smaller. Since the pieces are so much smaller, there's going to be a lot more of the pieces. So we're going to multiply these two numbers together, and what would we get if we multiplied 5,280 times 12? We would get 63,360 inches. Okay, so we're going to look at this, this format here. So when if we have 1 mile, to figure out how many yards, we multiply it by 1,760. So if you have 1 mile, we want to figure out how many yards, we multiply that by 1,760. If we wanted to figure out how many feet it is, we would take that 1,760 yards, multiply it by 3, because there's 3 feet in a yard, right? And we get 5,280, which remember is how many feet there are in a mile. If we want to figure out how many inches, we would multiply that 5,280 feet times 12, because there's 12 inches in a foot, and we get 63,360. So what would, if we had 2 miles, how many yards would that be? Well, remember, it's there's 1,760 yards in a mile, so we would, now since we're talking about 2, we'd multiply that number by 2. So that means we're going to take 1,760 times 2 and multiply that, and we will get 520 yards in 2 miles. Then how would we figure out if we wanted to know? So that's great, but how many feet would that be? And so remember, to figure out feet, we just take the amount of yards and we multiply it by 3. We could either take this, because we already know this is going to be 2 miles of yards, multiply it by 3 to figure out 2 miles of feet, or we could know that there's 5,280 feet in 1 mile and multiply that by 2. Either way, we are going to get 10,560. Okay, so there's that many feet in 2 miles. And to figure out the inches, there's going to be even more, because the inches are quite a bit smaller, right, than feet. They're 12 times smaller. So that's going to mean there's going to be 12 times more of them. So we can take, remember this is how many feet there are in 2 miles, we can multiply that by 12. Or we can take the amount of inches in 1 mile and multiply it by 2 to figure out how many inches are in 2 miles. Either way, we're going to get 126,720. Okay. So now it's your job to figure out how many yards are in 8 miles. So how many yards would be in 8 miles? Again, we are going to take that 1,760, which is how many yards are in 1 mile, and we're going to multiply it by the amount of miles, which here is 8. We're going to get 14,080 yards. And now we're getting to the good stuff. This is where we're going to be able to solve the problem, because remember, Carson ran 8 miles, and he needs to figure out how many feet that was, 8 miles is, and how many inches it is. So now we're getting to the part that's going to help us solve this problem. So again, we know that there are 5,280 feet in 1 mile. So how many feet would there be in 8 miles? There's going to be 42,240 feet in 8 miles. And how many inches would that be? So we could either take this, multiply it by 12, because that's how many inches are in that many feet, or we could take this 63,360 inches times the amount of miles, 8. Either way, it's going to be a really big number, right? It's going to be 506,880 inches. So, to answer the question of how many feet was the race that Carson ran, it was 42,240 feet. And how many inches did he run? He ran 506,880 inches, more than 500,000 inches he ran. Okay, so that is how you convert measurements within a measurement system using the standard measurement system, also the imperial system, from miles to yards, feet, and inches. So from a larger unit area to smaller units. Okay, we'll work more on this tomorrow. See you then.